years ago this week, President Lyndon Baines Johnson delivered what would be his final speech. President Johnson, who was ill at the time, defied his doctor's orders so that he could deliver his Civil Rights Symposium address. And here's a part of that speech.
To be black, I believe, to one who is black, or brown or whatnot, is to be proud. Is to be worthy, is to be honorable. But to be black in a white society is not to stand on level and equal ground. While the races may stand side by side, whites stand on history's mountain and blacks stand in history's hollow. And until we overcome unequal history, we cannot overcome unequal opportunity.
A piece out in Time magazine reflects on the message given by the 36th president that day and warns that progressives have failed to learn from it. It reads in part, quote, on December 12, 1972, former President Lyndon Johnson gave what would be his final speech 6 weeks before his death from a heart attack. He argued that in order to protect and build on the progress they had made, the public must agree that it's the responsibility of the government to play an active role in leveling the economic playing field to explicitly uplift Black Americans and other systemically disadvantaged groups. Yet all these years later, despite good intentions, progressives have not yet to heed Johnson's warning. Instead, choosing the same politically expedient path LBJ believed to be among his biggest failures, not inextricably associating the pursuit of racial equity from economic policy. Many of the policies and programs that LBJ championed remain under the threat of cuts or adverse reforms, including Medicare and Medicare Head Start, food stamps, federal housing programs, and affirmative action. Can we fulfill America's inherent promise of equality without commensurate economic opportunity? And if not, why aren't we doing more to deliver it? Joining us now, the author of that piece, President and CEO of the Lyndon B. Johnson Foundation, historian Mark Updegrove, also with us, co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader.
So, Mark, what do you believe progressives should do first?
Well, I think prioritize the issue of economic justice, Joe. I mean, I think progressives got very lucky in the midterms because both democracy and reproductive rights were on the ballot. There were referendums on those issues, and they ceded the economy to the Republicans who were talking about inflation. But the progressives weren't talking about jobs. They weren't linking economic or racial equity to economic justice. And I think that was what Lyndon Johnson was talking about all those years ago, and frankly was very humble. He said that he had failed in doing so during the course of his administration. He hadn't done enough to ensure that that gap was covered. So I think that making it a priority, Joe, would be a step in the right direction.
Hey, Mark, it's Jonathan Lemire. Great piece. And I was hoping you could expand a little bit about the parallel between President Johnson and our current president, Joe Biden, also a master of the Senate, there for decades, and one who has, 2 years in, a pretty enviable legislative record. Maybe not great society-esque, but maybe not that far off. Talk about what he's done so far and the challenges that await him now with a divided Congress the next 2 years.
You know, there were comparisons to Joe Biden and FDR and LBJ when he first took office because Biden had these great aspirations for what he wanted to achieve in the presidency, but there were somewhat false comparisons because LBJ had 2/3 majorities in both the House and the Senate. A lot of the legislation that he had put through, its time had come. It was almost inevitable that it be pushed through at some point, albeit you can't minimize LBJ's enormous importance in putting them through, as you suggested, the master of the Senate. But also, faith in government was at an all-time high in 1964 of 64%. It's at 18% now. Given that, though, what Joe Biden has accomplished, given the limitations, has been quite remarkable. I mean, the infrastructure package, the COVID relief, all the things that he pushed through last summer against all odds is a credit to Joe Biden and what he has done, again, given the limitations that he has had in his presidency to this point.
So, Lauren Leader, given the political dynamic of today, is there some opportunity for progressives especially to bring some of these initiatives and concepts to the finish line? And why hasn't the progress that LBJ was talking about been attained by this time?
Yeah, and I think, look, for Joe Biden, his commitments throughout his candidacy was that he was deeply committed to racial equity and to gender equality, and that those would be really the hallmarks and the pillars of where he would focus. I think the record is a bit mixed. I was at the White House this week for the signing of the Marriage Equality Act, which is, of course, extraordinary and historic and delivers on his promise of LGBTQ equity. I think women are still waiting on some of the key promises. In particular, right now, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which is sort of sitting with Schumer. We're hoping it will get into the omnibus package next week. Essential protections for pregnant workers who can be fired if they ask for accommodations because of their pregnancy. Some really key things that we need for women, especially in this post-Roe world. And obviously, Biden is focused on things like student debt relief, which he couldn't do legislatively, but did through executive order. So the next 2 years for him are all about making good on the commitments that he made to Black and brown communities, and especially, I think, to women as well.